Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the latest narration of the web series There Is No Epic Loot Here, Only Puns. If you're new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description, and as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 165, Sponge Garden. Delta knew somewhere deep in her being that Foodie was not her worst student, but he was pretty damn close. It was probably unfair to have best or worst students, but Delta prided herself on making 40% result feel like a victory and a 70% pass rate feel like a failing. It depended on the student in question. Foodie had one major issue. He could hold one concept very well, but that's all he had room for. His salt bats, for example, were a result of this. They were salty. Salt hurt on open wounds and was cheap. Throw it onto a cheap creature, and boom, salt bat. When Delta pointed out the fact that they melted in water, Foodie's mindset went from salt to water is good at erosion. There was no connection. Wyam reached up and drowned another hollow salt bat, demonstrating their weaknesses or amusing herself. Delta didn't quite know. She called Foodie's monsters hollow because they truly were. All her monsters had a spark of something. A thing inside the mana construction that was their body. It allowed them to grow, change, think, live, and be real. Foodie's monsters didn't have a single spark. It wasn't that it was just Delta that had them. When she'd been stuck in that dead silver dungeon that nearly killed her, the monsters waking up had sparks too. She'd have to see if the sparks appeared after so many levels, or if it was a personal development thing. Foodie, salt in water is bad. It's very bad for your salt monsters, Delta stressed, wondering why Sis thought that she could ever get through to these dungeons. Salt! It was like she was talking to an excited toddler who was part plant. Delta had no clue what she was doing. It was fine when she was messing herself up. That was on her. But now it involved an innocent, sort of, dungeon. Salt! What? I took a perfectly good dungeon and gave it anxiety. Delta threw her hands up. Jolly good. Wyam applauded from nearby. Something weird about this, sis, Jack called over as he kept tasting different parts of the wall. Oh, water salt, Jeb said smugly, as if he was competing with Foodie. Salt water. Yes, Foodie, that's what I've been saying, Delta mused distractedly, before pausing. She turned towards the entrance and stared. What did you just say? She asked slowly. Salt, the call responded. Delta let out a sigh, but threw him a tasty mushroom anyway for his quick response. A suggestion, dear mother, Lord Bushy said kindly from his side. Delta shot him a grateful smile. Please, I'm floundering, she admitted, with a little bit of embarrassment. You should try speaking to Foodie as a dungeon, not a wonderful person, he said, and Delta gave him a long look, stunned. We could traumatize it so badly it grows out of sheer panic, Wyam counter-suggested. Bob let out a screech and Wyam scowled. Poignant, but not without wisdom, dear Bob, she sighed. Delta turned to the dungeon and slowly relaxed her consciousness. It didn't take long for her thoughts of doubt, worry, and fear to sink away. The world around her melted away, leaving her in a dungeonscape, connecting lines of mana and moats where things stopped being what her eyes saw, expanding into concepts and symbols. This was how dungeons saw, and she stood up, a titan woman emerging from a burning sun like a galactic-sized god. Before her lay not her stars and world, but another's. This system was so small, barely surrounded by 7 rocks. Delta couldn't even call them asteroids without feeling like she was being too polite. The tiny, flickering candle shimmering without shape or direction. Moving forward, she watched as a small, limbless lizard emerged from the other side. Foodie lacked eyes, ears, and only opened his mouth to swallow nearby motes of mana. Delta had to bend down so far, reach so gently to cup the core in her hands. Foodie was no longer afraid of her. Perhaps this was how it had always seen Delta. There was no speaking required. Delta focused on this creature, the salt bats that lived in the first rock, and sent concepts of water, clashing destruction and waste. Foodie seemed to struggle, so she repeated the pattern slowly, one at a time, until she began to repeat them faster and faster. Water to salt, salt bats to destruction. Foodie stared back, his star glowing. Delta began sending the concept of salt bats. Foodie finished it with the idea of destruction, forward and back until Foodie was repeating the words by himself. Salt bats are destroyed in water. It clinked. Their stars glowed in joy. Dungeon, Foodie. Level 1, mana density increased. Core stability increased by 2%. Delta watched as the salt bats no longer dive-bombed at Jack and Wime, sticking to the ceilings until they got sneak attacks in. It was a massive step up over the previous suicide tactics. They still couldn't hurt Delta's monsters, but that wasn't the point. Delta could have gone in and done all the upgrading herself, but she wanted Foodie to take control of his own dungeon. There was one thing she still felt unsure about, something that she was not going to be able to ignore for much longer. "Foodie, do you know what death is?" she asked, and Foodie sent her a pulse of mana to show that he had heard her. "And of me?" "Yes, but it also for everyone. When people come here, you'll try to kill them, right?" she asked slowly, and Foodie didn't hesitate. "Yes, their end, my growth." "But what if you didn't have to kill? What if there were other ways to grow?" she offered, and Foodie was quiet for a second, trying to understand. "Death's best way to growth is me." Delta swallowed once. "But if people don't die and leave, they come back. More mana and resources," Delta argued, things from a different angle. "Come back? They here, eat now, no escape, no," Foodie insisted. "That's thinking now and here. But you also need to think of the future," Delta said, and she left Lord Mushy putting a comforting hand on her shoulder, his touch only barely affecting her. "Future? Food?" "Delta, time is a concept, a hard one," Wime said lazily from where she was training saltbats to fight for her amusement, with gentle praises and sharp pokes of her limbs. Bob was curled around her neck like a fleshy scarf. "Exactly. Sometimes I think I just struck underground for 10 years, sometimes 60, but I'm sure I'm still there and having an amazing dream of going on an adventure," Jack said from atop a rock where he was collecting samples. Everyone stared at him, and Delta needed Feeligan the therapist ASAP. Foodie had been listening, and he spoke up. "Dream?" he asked, throwing curiosity. Delta hummed. She could put aside her personal philosophy until Foodie was more aware of his options. Converting actual children to her ideals felt a bit dark. "Dreams are complicated. A dream can either be something you enjoy while you sleep or hibernate. Another way to have a dream is to have something you want more than anything else in the world. One thing you think about all the time," Delta explained with a smile. Foodie took some time to process, and his response surprised Delta. "He'd stab a beast." "Foodie, where did you get that idea?" she asked, and Foodie sent her an image of that rusty sword he had consumed a while back. It was a hunk of junk, but on the blade Delta could barely see the image of a unicorn?" she asked, incredulously. "My dream, head stabbercorn." Delta tried to form words, but she failed for a moment. All the themes in the world, and Foodie had chosen to be salty. But if there was someone who could cook up a unicorn from nothing, it was Delta. After all, she was amazing at making cute and sweet monsters. Her window popped up. "Foodie has gained 80 mana and can make a new floor." Delta frowned. "These floors are cheap as dirt. I need like 500 to get my 5th floor," she complained. "Want some cheese with that wine?" Wime called, and Delta shot her a dirty look. Due to the complexity of each floor, the cost rises greatly for Delta Core. Every feature affects the next floor and opens new options. Foodie has severely underdeveloped options, and thus his floors cost less. This system can make floors cheap, fast, or efficient, but only ever 2 at a time. That made sense, and Delta got very lucky with Hob and Gob. Wait, an idea. "Jack," she called out and pointed at the kobold, who looked to be making some sort of salt lamp. "Fetch me a creature from outside," she said grandly. If all went according to her plan, then Delta could give Foodie a massive benefit and boost with the contract. She turned to where she heard Jack return. "Good work, Jack. Put it over there." Delta's voice trailed off as her eyes went wide. "I lured him in with the promise of sweets," Jack said as a small boy in a poncho with a satchel around his waist blinked at the cave. He had tanned skin that spoke of many hours in the sun. "Jack, where did you find the child?" Delta asked, sounding like she was strangling back a scream. "Kids are everywhere. You just got 2 people together long enough and—" Jack began, and Delta's screech escaped for a second, making him stutter. "Where did you find this child?" Delta repeated a question. The child had wandered off towards Wyam. "Are you a goddess?" he asked in a high tone. He blinked at Wyam as if he had never seen anything like her. Wyam looked up from her saltbat army with a raised eyebrow over her amber eyes. "Do I look like a being of worship?" she asked coyly. "You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. Pa says Mama was as pretty as a goddess. Do you know her? He said he lives in the stars now," the boy said with no shame. Delta was about to open her mouth to warn Wyam to be nice when she surprised Delta. "Yes, I remember meeting a beautiful creature with a button nose like yours. She's proud of you, but you mustn't walk into dark caves with dubious characters in it. She wouldn't like that," Wyam murmured as she stroked the boy's hair once and sighed. If Delta didn't have a connection with Wyam, she wouldn't have even sensed the lie. The child grinned, showing a gapped tooth. "I can take the key, Packer. There is a whole village on the other side of the island. Kind of sorry-looking place," Jack said, and the kid shot him a heated look. "Victor is not sorry," he argued. Delta frowned at the name. She told Wyam to ask about the village since the boy couldn't see her. "It's a fishing village that lives inside this massive ribcage of a sea monster. It protects us from storms and sea huggins," the boy said brightly. He explained that it had only been around for about 40 years since the legendary hero fought an ancient beast on the island and devoured its flesh until only bone remained. They named the village in his honor. "For the last month or two, the sea huggins have been invading the island, and things have gotten bad," the kid said sadly. Delta winced. Sad children were a weakness of hers. "Why haven't you called the kingdom's knights or adventurers?" Wyam asked, sounding less affected. We can't get boats out, and the adults can't magic a message that far. The message goes only so far as this dead zone, the cursed land," the boy went on. Dead zone? If Delta remembered her map when the only thing between this island and the capital of note was, well, she could fix that. She was fixing that. New considered limiting the manners leaving the dungeon in levels, as to cause people outside massive headaches. These fair play people could use a little stillness. But then Delta would whine at him about hurting her precious villagers. New couldn't even remember any of their names beyond Rudy and Chris. There was the child, Dio, his friend, the blue mage Perry? It was definitely Perry. The idiot child, Grim. Or was it Grim? It could have been Greg. "You know full well what their names are. You have perfect recollection like the rest of us," Vera said as she cleaned up the pristine mug. "I would never waste precious brain space on them," New said with a small scoff. He was busy fiddling with the bar menu, but every option he wanted was declined by Vera, and the system just removed them on her whim. Delta had ruined a beautiful thing. Absolutely tyrannical control. Well, there was one thing they could both agree on. Welligan, a thin membrane slime that is near invisible. The creature shrugs off the common elements easily, such as fire, ice, and copper, carbon, potassium, and sulfur. Seems to have built-in sunglasses, but it has no eyes. It was a door that people didn't know was there. It also blocked future fire grenades, but when New tried to figure out where the upgrade came from, he was led down a twisting knot of sticky ideas. He could part and reform with ease, making him a clever little door that could also trap and smother someone. That last part was New really reaching for some sort of satisfaction. "Are you sure we can't add ceiling-mounted flamethrowers?" New said, turning as the slime formed like a glossy silk before turning transparent. Its sunglasses rose down into place, making it look sturdy and protective. The glasses dissolved and reappeared at Welligan's whim. "They don't match the decor. I got an image to market," Farrah grunted. New grumbled as he reappeared in the storage room and opened the menu. Something here had made him feel better. Storage room. A little bit of everything all of the time. Features. Mary the Chaos Mouse, random selection of dungeon goodies, a buffet of general snacks, a secret door to Maestro, Songmaster of Doom and Soul, sturdy shelves. Upgrades. The Dark One's approval. Using the key from Waddle's nest opens the room, which makes better loot, and no secret entrance to Maestro. The best food and drinks will be offered, and there is 1 in 10 chance to find a door straight to the 2nd floor. However, if someone under Waddles' bad luck curse uses the key, they will be shrunk to half of Mary's size for 5 minutes. Twitty, a small canary that flies about as merry as active. Things seem to just work out in its favor when it's being chased. On its leg is a small piece of paper with a clue to Maestro's entrance. Twitty's magic potion. Somewhere in the room is a strange vial that almost compels Twitty to drink it. The effects are startling and terrifying. These were tempting, New had to admit, but they lacked what he wanted, that edge, that bizarre danger and surprise. He looked around as he felt Sister focus on him. He shivered. He was never meant to be a focus. New was never meant to be, period. Especially since... It didn't matter. "Are you not happy?" Sis said to him through the network. "I am not unhappy either," New responded dryly. "You've been taking pieces of yourself to aid Delta. You're not stable," Sis said, almost hesitantly. "Non-important pieces. Control, power, the deeper aspects of the system, things I can live without. I cannot live without Delta," he responded with no shame. "You could. You have. But in the end, I don't want you to be unhappy. I don't want people I care for to be sad anymore. Let me help," Sister offered, and New had no clue how she was going to help him. He was bored out of his skull, not dying. "Once Delta returns, perhaps you should take the next dungeon trip to aid another core. Most of them require Delta's special care, but there are a few dungeons, important dungeons, that cannot be peaceful. Some are in danger of simply not knowing better. Others are in danger from things far worse," Sister explained. "From what? Dungeons are pretty good at surviving anything short of an organized mob in the beginning," New said, trying not to sound too interested. "Their silence may be imprisoned here, but this is only their main force. Many pockets of their ilk remained unopposed. They will feast on people, monsters, and dungeons. New dungeons will be easily overrun if discovered in these dark places," the girl said somberly. "So, Delta teaches some dungeons to be bright and cheery, while I help others survive in the darkness. Sounds like a lot of work," New trailed off. "These dungeons actually need to use traps," the goddess said dryly. "I'm sold." Now he just had to wait for Delta to return from teaching some poor core how to hug and sing songs or something. New was mildly excited, not that he would admit it. He couldn't wait to meet his first protege. They would be smart, cunning, and best of all, guilt-free for New. "You took the chieftain's son," Delta screeched at Jack, who was cleaning between the toes of the particularly solid piece of salt. "I didn't take him. I lied to him in order to lead him into a dark cave when no one would hear him or find him," Jack corrected. "Who's he talking to?" the boy Vadelin asked Wyam. The tree had taken weird liking to the kid, but she was also nice to Dio and the others. "Delta. She's the ghost of Christmas guilt-tripping," the second-floor boss said airily. "What's Christmas?" he asked right after. "A yearly tradition where humans cut down the mightiest tree they can find in order to decorate its rotting corpse with baubles and insulting vapor. Atop its crown they place an idol to another god to show dominance, and under it they place offerings and tributes before they feast upon the birds and berries," Wyam said with excitement. "Did they try to cut you down?" Vadelin asked in a gasp. Wyam buffed her nails with a smirk. "Many men have tried to claim me. I have discouraged them all, except my sweet knight of honor and courage," she sighed to herself. "Mom?" Jeb asked, sounding confused. Delta turned, face puffy from yelling at Jack. "What's wrong, Jeb?" she asked, trying to remain composed. "Fishies are coming." He pointed out to the open beach area, where the tide had reached to show shapes emerging from the pool in waves. Vadelin turned and went pale. "The Madjars, they're the invading Sea Hagans," he cried, as about 30 in total emerged onto the beach, covered in the silvery scales of some fish and adorned with a thick coral stone. They had a selection of dark stone weapons and crystal versions that glowed with mana. "Maybe we can discuss things?" Delta said quickly. One of the Sea Hagans pulled its bluish arm back and let a spear fly at Vidalian without hesitation. The spear bounced off Ryan's raised arm as she curled it around the boy. "Shall I remove the heads and boil them in stew?" the boss asked Delta, who looked shocked, then angry at the attempted murder before her eyes. "Ask Vadelin if there are any good Sea Hagans," Delta said simply. Ryan repeated the question as Lord Mushy took up the vanguard to shield them. "The low blues and the surface tooth clans are okay. But the Magos attacked him too, the boy responded, shaking badly. Delta closed her eyes for a second as the Sea Hagans advanced closer. Their manner was putrid, and it reminded Delta of the Slimers. Refusing to act when someone was in danger, even if it meant killing to defend them, was not wisdom, it was indolence. Cute fishies, not sandwalkers, Foodie said, sounding confused as all heck. You know what? Delta could work with that. A solid foundation. Into the dungeon. Let's power level Foodie and save crying children, Delta commanded. I got sand in my eyes, Jack said defensively. Nu was going to be bummed out that he was missing this. And I'll be there for its first spike wall trap kill, Nu told Farah excitedly. The goblin said, not paying attention at all. And when it gets fire, oh, the fire arrows, he gushed. Farah hoped that Nu would soon remember that the average Nu dungeon was like a sponge, brain dead, soaks up anything, and filled with holes in all logic. Farah reckoned Nu would gain valuable life lessons being a sponge daddy. Patience, hopefully, but Farah would settle for deep regret. End of chapter. I would like to thank the T5 peeps, Cam Maxwell, Casper Arnholtz, Bushmaster 177, Leslie 517, Red Panda 121, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Lightjock, Dragzoon WRE, Lord Azrakul, Severin Cerberus, and Arcadian. Thank you very much.